This is a recording of the July 30th Saturday morning meet of the NMRA-PCR Coast Division.
So our agenda, two items here I just wanted to talk about very quickly, and then we're going to jump over to Ed for Airbrush Basics, his clinic, and then we'll, after the clinic, we'll have some show what you're modeling towards the end. So two things to talk about. As you saw in the email, if you read the email, I don't know if anybody reads those anymore. We actually had a conversation. David Givens had a conversation with Larry Osorio, and we scheduled a field trip to the Golden State Model Railroad Museum, and that will actually be on August 21st, which is a Sunday. What we're going to do is they're going to open at 11. From 11 to noon for us to come in, kind of get a behind the scene, go inside, really look at the layout when they don't have to be operating for the public. So then they'll be open at noon for the public, so you can stay and probably continue conversations, watch trains, watch them get set up and going. So kind of be a little bit there around for as long as we probably want afternoon. My thought was to maybe suggest having a place for lunch. Pick somewhere up in the Richmond area, coming Richmond or down back towards the south for a place maybe at like 12:30 or something for folks to meet for lunch if there's interest. And then what we've gotten is we've actually got 4 layouts that are going to be open in the afternoon. So Tony Thompson, John Cockle, Steve and Jim Radke, Steve Van Matter and Jim Radke. So that's three of those are completely operating layouts, well done scenery. Jim is building a new layout, and so we'll be able to visit his layout and check it out. So that'll be on August 21st. You'll get some more information about that in the next email. But I think it's a great opportunity to go up to Richmond, check out the GSMRM and sit the Golden State Model Railroad Museum, see what they've done recently, get a little bit of inside tour from them as a club, and then get to check out some layouts in the North Bay, since we probably won't have a North Bay event probably for a year or so. So it's an opportunity to see a few. The layouts are kind of spread going south, so we'll probably try to time it so that you can see the layouts that are close up to Richmond first, and then the ones that are farther south down in Berkeley towards 5 o'clock. So, if you leave there at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, 1:30, you can kind of stop at each one and spend half hour, 45 minutes as you head home. Any questions about that or comments?
I'll make a quick comment. The date, the time, and the arrangement were per the request of the folks at the GSMRM. So I know that probably some folks will have other commitments, they can't make it, but I went with what they were comfortable with as our hosts.
Yep, and thanks, David, for getting that set up, and thanks to the members for being very responsive on open houses. By the way, just as a side, we are building a database up. We have a Coast superintendent of Gmail login, and we're building up a database in that of layouts. We started with a bunch of layouts that have been open in the past. If you have a layout and would like to have it be on the list to be open and be contacted when we're in an area, when we're going to have an event in an area, the idea is to have a list. So when we have an event in an area, we have an immediate list of the 5 to 10 layouts that would be close that could potentially be open for that event. And so we're actually doing the same thing. We'll do that planning for the September 25th event. This will be an event with clinics in the morning, layout tours in the afternoon at the South Bay Railroad Historical Society in Santa Clara. So that basically is all I have. So I'm going to throw it over and introduce Ed here. Ed Hall is a MMR, and he's going to do a clinic that I think is really cool. And quite frankly, I don't spend enough time doing this, so I'm looking forward to it also, which is about Airbrush Basics. I just actually picked up some paint from Just Trains yesterday. I've got to paint some siding with some AccuColor paint, and so I'm going to listen here and pay attention to get ready to do some airbrushing. So, Ed, I will send it over to you and let you. I'll give a second here and introduce you. Stop, pause, and then you can go ahead and get started. And Do you want to share your screen first? Why don't you go ahead and share your screen, and then we'll just start from there, because that way we won't have the, when we do the clinic recording, we won't have the sharing in there. So just do that, click share, upper left. So get to the Zoom window and then click on share.
Hit escape?
No, are you in the Zoom window? Do you see the window with all of us?
No, I see my clinic.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, you're gonna have to escape. You'll have to escape and get out of that. Yep.
Okay.
And then just click on the Zoom icon on the bottom on the toolbar.
There we go. Well,
And yeah,
let me try a different view. There we go. My ugly mug's in there.
yep. You're spotlighted, so you're the, and so now click on the share screen on the bottom.
Okay.
Do we want questions held till the end of the presentation?
Red, it's really your call. Do you want people to ask questions during? Are you cool with that? Having more discussion? Is that fine?
Yeah, if it's if you can hold it well, it kind of, I've noticed that people forget about the questions and feel like they don't want to ask them at the end. So I'm fine with asking them right away. Once you see something, we'll talk about it. I think that may help other people with that particular item too.
Cool. We'll just
Go with either way. It doesn't.
we'll go that way. If you have a question you want to ask, and you can throw it in the chat, and we can use those at the end.
Yeah.
Okay, now just throw it into slideshow mode at the bottom there.
Okay.
Or the little one icon, no, the one icon right next to the slider bar that makes it bigger. The one right next to that.
Oh, that little tiny.
That one there. That one there. Click that one right there. There
Oh.
you go.
Nothing happened.
You may want to click it again.
There
There
we
you
go.
go. Okay, so I'll stop pause and throw it to you.
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. How's everybody doing today?
Okay.
Good.
Everybody's good. My name is Ed Hall. I do clinics on airbrushing and a couple other clinics as well, mostly related to the Southern Pacific Railroad. I don't think there's any other railroads, do you? I'm not sure. There's Santa Fe. Basically, what we're going to do is talk about airbrushing, how to buy equipment, just the basics of it. I started airbrushing back in 1982, 3, something like that. I bought a little plastic gun and I really enjoyed it until it broke. And then I had a friend that had a Binks Model B Wren, and he just gave it to me. He said, I can't use it. So I started using that, and I've been using it ever since. I find it's easy to use, and basically it's a great gun. So let's start with the Corvette here. This is a 1967 Corvette in silver pearl metallic. It's been repainted at this point, and I didn't do it, but the painter over at Alhanu Chevrolet Buick in Lake Orion, Michigan, painted it. And it just mystified me how he was able to do this. I was completely enthralled in it. So that kind of set the seed to spray painting for me. And then, it just morphed into more other things. Okay, now, while we're doing this clinic, watch for the asterisk on your screen next to a subject. Pay attention when you see the asterisk. Don't sleep through these parts, and no, you can't sleep through the rest of it either. Remember, it's what you learn after you know it all that counts. That's a quote from Chip Foose. Let's talk about the brush itself. The brush is started out as a paint distributor, an atomizer. similar to what my grandmother had on her dresser for her perfume. So you just squeeze that little rubber ball and the perfume would come out. That's the same principle as this. The airbrush was patented in 1876 by Francis Edgar Stanley, the Stanley steamer that cleans your carpets of today. That was in Newton. Now there are several types of airbrushes. There's internal, external, single action, double action. The double action is a bit more complicated. And since I paint a lot of equipment, I really don't have a need for that, even though I do have one. It's more for detail work, maybe using it for special little projects, you know, and so forth. You can use propelled canned air. They make it specifically for the gun. You use a compressor, an air tank, or a spare tire. I used a spare tire for quite a while. Worked fine. Let's talk about acquiring the brush. And there are several different ways to do it. You can go on to these online auctions, buy it now, $269 shipping and handling. There's several different ways to buy it. I'd suggest that if you're starting out, get a used gun. I prefer the Binks Wren. It's a Model B, and that is a good all-around air gun. You can get it for a fairly reasonable price. I would definitely not buy one from a car automotive paint supplier. You'll pay through the nose with it, and it's really unnecessary. You can also get them at yard sales or swap meets. You can get them at your Harbor Freight. I think it might be a little bit more expensive than $9.99 for the gun now, but still it's not that much extra with inflation. $69.99 for the compressor, $87 for both in a kit. Like I said, I use the Binks Model B. It's called a Wren. I have a Pachette H, a Grex, and an Iwata Neo. And I also acquired a gun it was at a national event in Detroit, and it looks like an early Pachette. It's very heavy, a little bit awkward, but it looks like one of their original models that they came out with. This is a Binks Model B. They have an A, B, and C. Don't buy the A, don't buy the C, buy the B, right in the middle, the Goldilocks. This is one that I acquired on an online auction for $16. Several hoses and cans, and the gun is somewhere in there, or parts of it. Then you have the Pachette Model H. This is also a good all-around gun. Once in a while, I feel kind of nostalgic, and I'll pick this up and use it and tell myself that I'm putting a super quality paint job on. And it's just because it's an expensive gun, and it sprays just like any other gun, but it's got a little more balance to it. So I enjoy using it. I also enjoy using the Grex, the Genesis XA. This looks like it doesn't fit a human hand. It's kind of weird to paint with it, but once you pick it up and you put your fingers where they belong, it's surprisingly accommodating to your hand. And that one, there's several different cups that you can put on it, and it works really, really uniquely by itself. If you're going to be doing a lot of small detail work, I would suggest using this. This is the Iwata Neo TRN-2. This is a trigger gun, and this one is surprisingly easy to use also. I really enjoy using this. Like the other guns, they have several different containers that you can use. And I tend to use all of them when I use it. It's quite a nice gun.
Ed,
Yes,
on that last image you had, are you going to cover those specific containers later in the clinic?
the containers.
Yeah, I'm just curious what the different use of the 3 containers were. If you're going to cover it later on, ignore me and go ahead and get to that. But I'm just curious.
Well, if you look at the screen right in the middle at the bottom,
Correct.
there's just a little kind of looks like a bone that screws into the gun so that you can press fit the big container to the left.
Okay.
And if you're going to be spraying for some period of time, then you can put that in, and it'll, I think it's a 2-ounce jar. And then the one on the right is a 1 ounce, and the 2 ounce would be more accommodating if you're painting a larger object. I usually paint locomotives. I paint a lot of them. If you're going to paint a boxcar or something, the cup gun on the right would probably suffice. You might have to refill it once. It depends on what you're painting and what your needs are at the time. And I find that every time I paint, it's something different. So I pick a gun that I'm going to use that makes it easier to use. And sometimes I end up with a 2-ounce container because I don't like to stop and start again. And 2 ounces mostly for O scale. You can use it for HO if you're putting a lot of coats on it, but I tend not to do that. In fact, almost every model that I paint, I end up with what they call a holiday or two. And a holiday is a place where the paint didn't go. And usually on steps or on the back side of steps, I sometimes, miss that part. And I just touch it up with a brush. It's not a big deal. So, I don't really care about missing them. If it's in the body of the engine, then you're going to have to reload the gun and paint it with an air gun because the paint has a different texture and color to it when you brush it opposed to spraying it.
And thank you. That object in the middle was the one that really confused me. The other two I had a pretty good handle on, but Steinmeier, thank you.
Yeah, that's a press fit. You screw it into the gun and then you press fit the container in the very top of it.
Hey, Ed, can I ask a question? This is Phil. So, one of the things I noticed is you often get different feed rate, basically nozzles and pins, or, the center needle.
Right.
Do you keep different guns kind of set up for different rates of paint for different kind of processes? So you've got kind of one for more, low for doing weathering, and one maybe like this that's designed more for coverage when you're doing a base coat on a model. Do you is that a reason to have multiple airbrushes?
Well, I have multiple airbrushes because I like to buy them.
Well, I was thinking of this mainly as justification.
I've got about 20 of them. I don't know why. Now that I'm looking at the video, I'm probably going to go online and buy another one. I don't. They just appeal to me. I don't know why. But look at this Iwata. I mean, that thing is just it's crazy looking. It's got orange and black on the handle. It's really neat looking. And that's probably why I bought it. But this thing, you have to kind of watch it, because this is a gun just like they use, the same principles that they use in automotive painting. And when you pull the trigger, air comes out. If you keep pulling it slowly, then the product comes out. So if you pull it all the way, you've got to move quickly, because now you're at maximum on fluid withdrawal from the container. If that does that make sense to you guys? So it's like a double action gun. That's basically what it is. But it's a wonderful gun. I really like this. I like the Pachette too, but this one I just like to use because it's so pretty looking. I mean, that makes sense. But if I'm going to paint something, okay, let's go back a little bit in my history. I have a friend here in town that I paint for. About every year, he has a new project for me. I try to put him off a little bit because I'm trying to get out of painting for people, but I still have a few customers left over. So he's into O scale, and to paint O scale with this gun is it's too much. It depends on the size of the locomotive. If it's a small locomotive, then I can do it. But the last time he wanted his big boy painted, and I had to go to Minuteman Hobbies, which sells scale coat paint. That's my primary paint that I use, and order a couple cans of black. And so that, I didn't even need, I still have some left over in the container. So it depends on what you're going to paint. If you're painting a big boy in O scale, you're going to have to go to a different type of thing, period. Airbrushes won't work. There's just not enough material that can come out of it to put a quality paint job on. And at that point, I might go to one of my other touch-up guns, which a touch-up gun is a terminology that the automotive people use. Say they have a car that has a little spot on it that they want to touch up. Well, then they use this small gun rather than a huge gun that they paint the entire car with to spot that one area. So I might use my touch-up gun in this case to paint a big boy. I could have done that, but it was so much easier just to buy a spray can. And at some point in time, you might also consider that. You buy several different colors in spray cans, and then you don't have any cleanup to do on the gun. It's kind of a nice idea in itself. But these guns are all kind of particular. They all have a little niche purpose. And you said something about weathering. I don't ever, I'll never say never. I rarely weather anything. And the reason that I don't weather is because I paint mostly brass imports. And if you paint brass and you do a top-notch quality paint job, why would you cover it up with weathering? But it also affects the value of it. It depletes the value. And I tend to have the idea that if I'm going to buy this piece of brass for $1,000, I'm going to put a $500 paint job on it, and then I'm going to sell it for $1,200. It just doesn't happen. I'll probably end up selling it for $8. People don't pay for that weathering. I've had that proven over and over. So if somebody wants me to weather it, I try to steer them somewhere else. And you shouldn't weather At least I don't believe in weathering with an air gun. I think it's, there's several other ways to do it, chalks, washes. I've seen models ruined with an airbrush when they attempted to weather it because it's got spots all over it. So does that convince everybody not to weather? At least with an air gun. There are certain areas that you can do it, and I do that. I'll put the model on a table and I'll put paper down on both sides of it, and I spray at the base of the track, and it literally bounces the weathering from the table into the model, and it's called bounce weathering. And I'll tend to do that just to put a little something on it, but it's so slight that you can't see it. And if you compare it to a model that isn't weathered at all to this one, then you can identify it. But yeah, I really don't recommend using an airbrush for weathering. Okay, any other questions while we're, okay. Let's talk a little bit about taping and masking. I use 3M Painter's Grade 2-inch tape. I'll buy tons of that stuff. It's the regular beige tape that you can buy at Home Depot or Lowe's. It's nothing special. I go through so much tape that I find it more economical to buy this. And there's other tapes out there. The Japanese or they have a lot of tapes out, Tamiya or whatever. They have tapes that are really good, but it's expensive. And like I said, I go through a lot of it. I use a 1/4 inch thick by 3 inch wide by 16 inch long plate glass and a fresh knife every time I go to tape. Trying to do a Santa Fe war bonnet is probably one of the most difficult ones to do. The surface temperature should be between 50 and 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Don't sit out in the sun and do it. The tape will turn to liquid and get all over your model, which it does sometimes anyway. And all you do is just use another little piece of tape to kind of blot it and pull it off. Make patterns for special shapes that will be used over and over again, like the Santa Fe war bonnet. Sometimes Microscale puts a nice decal package together. Just take it and run it through a copy machine, and that can be your pattern. A vinyl cutting machine, if you live in a city that has a, let's see, how do I put it? Has a sign shop in it. You can possibly go to them if you've got to repeat the same pattern over and over again. I had to do that because I painted a 1941 Lark passenger train. It was 18 cars for the train, and then for protection cars, there was about 5 more. So I had a lot of painting to do and a lot of masking to do. And we have a vinyl cutting machine at work, and I told my friend that runs the machine, I said, give me just a couple lines where I can take out a piece for the windows, and here's the dimensions. And he fed it into the machine and made a mask, and I took it home and tried it, and it worked. I says, okay, I need about 25, 30 more of these. And the vinyl is kind of unique in itself. it moves around a lot, so you have to put it down. If you have to move it, you're gonna end up with a problem. If you have to move it more than once, you might as well just take it off and start with a fresh piece. Any questions on that?
How concerned do you need to be when you're putting the vinyl down about the paint getting underneath it, even the first time that you put it down?
Well, the first, yeah, you have to cinch the edge of it where the paint's gonna go under it. And I use a fingernail or a blunt object for that to press it into the model so that you won't have that happen. The vinyl does have some give to it. So if you have a little vent or object you're going over, you can cinch it down with a fingernail or maybe a screwdriver. I use screwdrivers, small, little tiny ones for that. And then you can also slice it if it's a larger object, and slice it on both sides and then put another piece of tape, regular tape, over it. And that'll keep the paint from going under it. Does that help?
Some, yes. Thank you.
Okay.
What about painting the edge of the tape with the, to be colored over, and then let it dry so that you have a sharp edge?
Oh, you paint the edge with a color that's already on there?
Correct, with a
Yeah.
little fine
I've
brush.
tried that, and it added a little bit of time to it, and it just didn't work for me. It did work to a certain extent, but I still got a little bleed under. So I'm not really sold on that. If you can figure out a way to do it better, then by all means go for it. But I didn't have such great luck with that. What I like to do is get the tape on the model and make sure that it's cinched down to the surface. That way you're guaranteed that you're not going to have any bleed under. You're always going to get a little bit. And I'm not sure if it's after this, I think it is. I'll discuss that in a little bit. If not, remind me and I'll come back to it. But I think I have another page on here that talks about that. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, spraying with an airbrush. The pressure should be about 35 pounds. Adjust the spray to a full pattern of what you're spraying. The wet spot should be the size between a nickel and a quarter in diameter. Triangulate your light. If you're going to paint anything, have your source of light off in the distance, and then look at the surface of the model, and you'll see you can kind of move it around and with your hand, but you want it to be well lit. And then when you're spraying, you want to be able to see that pattern precisely, because otherwise you're going to either paint it on your previous pattern or paint where you shouldn't paint and end up with a less than desirable surface. You want it to be nice and glossy. Scale coat paint is a gloss paint. I always use scale coat or true color if I can, because it does have gloss and it's easy to decal afterwards. So just make sure that you're painting on that edge with a wet spot as you go back and forth. use steady line by line pattern. Start spraying before you come across the model and go past the end after the end of the body after you're painting. Apply light fog coats first. And what I mean by first is I just take the model and kind of spray all over it real quick with a layer, and that will give you a little stickation. It sticks better when there's a light coat on there. It'll dry immediately, and then you can layer on your wet coats. Okay, this is a picture of me mixing this bottle of paint. I've got paint that's probably 30 years old, and I still use it, maybe even older. But this is one of those little electric mixers, and it works great. It really does. You can shake it, but you're going to take at least a half an hour to shake all the goops out of it. This seems to break up the little gelled spots that congeal at the bottom. What I'll do at first is take a screwdriver or something and scrape the bottom of the jar, and then I'll put this in there and run it until I feel that it's all mixed up thoroughly.
Question?
Yes.
What do you do if you use a jar and then you get half of it done? How do you seal it so when you get back to it a year or 5 years from now, it's still going to be usable?
Okay, that's a good question. And sometimes there's no way to do that, and I'm not sure why. It may be because the paint was old and to start with. But what I do every time is I open the jar, mix up my paint, and I make sure that the lid is very clean. And I also make sure the top of the jar is extremely clean. I'll wipe it down with a paper towel. And then when I'm done with that bottle for that period, I'll put the cap back on, and then I shake it. And when you shake it, that puts a little thin layer of paint around the top of it, and it seals it. And that it should last. If it's about a half of a jar, it's probably not going to last. I've had trouble with that over the years. A fresh full jar will probably last another couple of years. Once you open them, there is something called a clock that dictates how long that's going to last, and I've had some go bad almost immediately. I don't know what the deal is with it, but I always tend to clean the two places where they meet, and that way at least I've given it a fighting chance.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Okay. Let's talk a little bit about a technique. This is, if you look at the picture, the lower part of the picture has a gray surface to it. Let's call that black. And we're painting a Southern Pacific F7 in Black Widow paint scheme. And the paint that's coming out of the jar is silver. And what we're painting is the front of the locomotive where the decal is set to the locomotive and the paint is proceeding to fill in the area that the decal doesn't, because the decal does not cover the entire front of the locomotive. So what we do, this is one of the first models that I painted was a trio of F7s, an ABA, Southern Pacific. And I used this technique that a friend of mine told me about in probably 1970, that they painted 3 AMX cars, red, white, and blue. And he was going to school up at Ferris State, I think it was Ferris State College in Michigan. And this is what he described to me. He says, we taped the area that we wanted to keep the paint from bleeding, but then right at the edge, we lifted it up a little bit. And you can see the beige area that's lifted up about a 45-degree angle. And so the paint is going to the right, and it turns into a mist right under the tape. And this is what's called feather edge masking. You won't be able to discern a difference between the paint and the decal at this point, because hopefully the decal and the paint are the same texture and color and pigment and all that. But this is what I did to paint this. And
Hey, can I, oh, go ahead, continue.
okay, if you want me to go back, just say so and I'll go back. But right below the 364, below the headlight, is where the decal starts, and above that is all paint. And when I entered the models in the contest, Bill Scott asked me, he says, I know that top of that engine at the nose is paint, and I know the decal is on there, but I can't see where the line is. And I said, well, this is what I did, and I explained it to him. But it's kind of a unique way of doing things, and it worked out pretty well for this. Do you want me to go back to that other slide?
No, actually, Jeff has a question.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Well, I'm sorry, my question was about storing paint. What about storing them upside down? In other words, the screw top to the bottom.
Oh, I
and
never
then
do
filling
that.
it with nitrogen.
Yeah, don't ever do that. The reason is because the pigment will separate. And if you have a lot of pigment in the paint, usually there's at least a ½ an inch in the bottom of the bottle. And what you'll end up with is a problem. How do you get that pigment off the gasket when you open it? And you have to shake it and shake it and shake it in order to get it off. And you're not going to get all of it off. If you leave it upright, then you can shake it a little bit to start the process of mixing it and turning it back into a solution that you can use. But you're still going to have to paint, or you're still going to have to stir the bottom of the jar with a small screwdriver or blunt object or something to get that stuff at the bottom into the liquid so that you can stir it with the electric paint stirrer. Or you can also put it in a paint shaker. But I don't know if they make I've had trouble with scale coat with those 2-ounce bottles in a paint shaker because they're so huge that they go real slow. And unless you have a paint shaker that's big enough to really get it going, you're going to end up with a lot of stuff when you open the jar up, and it's going to be on the lid, it's going to be on the top of the jar, and then you're going to be forced to deal with that right there, and it's going to be a mess. So does that make sense to you?
Thank you. What about using nitrogen?
I've never used that. Do you know anybody heard of that? I've heard of it, or CO2, or something other than oxygen that, keeps it from going away. But the ultimate thing that keeps paint in good condition is the ability to seal the top of the jar. And what happens is that the paint will solidify if the gas is off gas. So you have to have that seal. I think the seal is more important than adding anything into it. But I've never tried that. I've heard about it, and
it works for wine, but who knows with paint. But I've found we have that cellophane you get at Costco, the plastic wrap you get at Costco, and the big thing with the cutter. And I find if you cut little, 1.5-inch squares of that, put it on the jar, and then screw the lid down so the lid screws with the plastic between the threads, it actually gaskets it. If you're storing it for a long time, find that tends to seem to seal them a lot better than depending on, because a lot of the paints have some sort of a seal that comes from the factory. When you open it, you break that seal, and then you're generally dependent on a piece of paper or something. If you go back to the old Flocals, they used to have that plastic piece that was kind of on the top of the jar and sealed. When you open that, it's hard to get it resealed. But if you put cellophane across so it's far enough so when you screw the lid down, it cinches in the middle, it seems to work pretty well.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's good, Phil. See my note in the chat.
Yeah, when Scale Coat had the clear cellophane seal on the top that they glued down, that was the best seal. And I wrote to them and I bought a whole bunch of it. And they towards the end, before they switched over, they told me that I could only get it with the top, the metal top. So I said, well, I don't care. Just give it to me. I need it. So I ended up buying the tops, and they had that clear seal in it. And yeah, that is the best way to do it. And I do have some Floquil and some Scale Coat seals that they used to glue to the top of the jar. And since then, and it's been for a number of years now, they've gone to a white child-proof cap, and that has a kind of a soft white foam top to it, and that's what they're using to seal it with now. And it seems to be working, but you're right. I think that plastic is the best. And sometimes if I'm going to be using, say, an odd color and I want to keep it for a while, I'll use one of those clear plastic seals in order to make sure that it's going to be around and long enough. Black, I don't care about. In fact, I don't even shake the bottles of black. I go through black. I buy it by the case because of everything that I paint is steam, and it's always black. So I go through black like you wouldn't believe.
Question, Ed, on this picture you've got on the side with the F unit, so you put the silver paint down and then probably the decal over it, basically, so it covers the edge of the paint, or is it the other way around?
Okay, this is a little trick that I learned, and I learned this on a Amtrak engine. What you do is you have the model ready to paint, and you get like on this one, it's all black. I had to stop and think for a minute because Amtrak, you have to put a layer of gloss down first. But on this model, I didn't, because the clear that extends past the ink is turns invisible when you put it on a color. If it's on a silver, it has an outline. So if you're painting, if you put a decal, any decal on silver, you have to put a gloss coat down first. Okay, so what I did on this one is I decaled it first, and then I brought the paint to the decal. I didn't, that sounds abbreviated, and it is, because there's another step involved. And what that step is, you need to gloss coat over the decal in order to seal it down so that you can tape it. And when you tape on a decal, you should always take and put the tape on your palm of your hand and put it on a couple times to remove some of the stickiness to it. Because when you go to pull it off, the decal will come off too.
Yeah, and I understand a lot of this is going to be doing it, and we learn by the mistakes of others, and some of us have to be the others. So I understand there'll be mistakes made as we learn the process also.
Right. Yeah, it's there's sometimes I'll go through a couple sheets of decals for one locomotive. It's not, I guess it's profitable for micro scale.
Thank you.
But anyway, any comments or questions on that?
Phil, pardon me, Edwin, I'm curious, how many more slides do you have to go? I wanted to just get an idea of where we were in the presentation.
I've probably got about 10 more to go.
Thank you. Just want to make sure that we managed to get through those.
Okay, are we running out of time?
Not really, but it's more in the sense of trying to make sure that all the slides are seen and plenty of folks have chances to ask questions on those slides also that are yet to be seen.
Okay. All right, well, speaking of slides, let's go to the next one. Taping and masking. Remove tape as soon as possible. I mean, right away. As soon as I'm done cleaning my airbrush, I'm taking the tape off. For bleed under, and we'll get to some other paints in a second here. But this is what we were talking about earlier. For bleed under, dip a cotton swab or a small paintbrush in paint thinner, not on lacquer thinner, paint thinner, and you blot the excess. Wipe it to the fresh paint. You have to go to the fresh paint and then pull your brush up. You have to use a clean brush every time you touch the model, which means that if you wipe and remove some paint where there was bleed under, you have to clean the brush, and that involves just dipping it in paint thinner and cleaning it on a paper towel, and then dip it again, and then touch the paper towel to remove the excess, because you don't want to put too much paint thinner on, and then wipe it to the fresh paint. Everybody has a question. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, that will work, and that technique has saved my butt. I don't know how many. Well, pretty much every time I do two colors. There's a 5 hour window to remove any unwanted material. That's with scale coat paint. How to use scale coat paint to the best possible result. Why use scale coat 1 and 2 paints? Don't gloss over this. That's the whole point. Gloss. It's glossy. It's ready to decal. Scale coat paint is also its own primer. You don't need to use primer. You cover up detail when you use primer. The MFDS, it's a NAP, those documents say that it's a naphtha base enamel paint. Let's talk about true color paint. Yeah, we won't talk about acrylics. True Color paint is an excellent paint. It's very fine pigment. If you get bleed under with True Color paint, you're in deep trouble because you can't pick it up. You have to do a better paint job, tape job on that. Acrylics, don't ask me about acrylics. Really don't ask. I don't like acrylics. I don't use acrylics. I'll probably never use acrylics except for maybe buildings or something that I brush with a brush. Like earlier, the battery powered mini mixer, paint shaker. I've got a paint shaker that I wore out and I put an Athearn F7 motor in it. Add an agitator, put a little nut or a tiny screw in there to use to agitate the paint as you shake it. I had a video, and I don't like looking at pictures of myself. It's creeping me out because I'm looking at myself when I'm talking in the column here. But I did a video, but basically, when you open a jar of paint, you have to be very meticulous about one corner at a time. Don't rip the gasket, and you remove that clear plastic on the top of scale coat and flow quill. You just break the seal and be very careful not like I said, not to rip it. And then once it's all intact, then you clean it. And when you've poured the paint out, you clean it again, and then you put the top back on and then screw it down tight and shake it, and you're all set. Oh, I guess we're a little short on that. I had about 5 left to go. Okay, where did I use my airbrush on that?
I would say the striping on the hood, the pinstripe, but that's just a guess.
No. That's a 72 Chevelle Malibu that I rebuilt. A semi-frame off restoration. Everything is new on it. Crate motor. All of it's pretty new. There's a spot on the door, just below the door on the sill, that I chipped as I was getting in the car, and I fixed that spot with my airbrush. And what I did is I just took the brush and put a layer of paint down that was kind of wet, and then I drew the paint gun back to where it was almost dry coming out of the gun, hitting the car, and filled the chip with paint. This is a single stage paint for you automotive people, rather than dual with a clear coat. It's the same paint that the car was painted with when it came out of the factory. And the part that I painted were the mirrors. They're sport mirrors. I got them for Christmas, and I says, I'm heading out to the garage. I'm gonna go spray my mirrors. They turned out all right. So this is the end. I guessed a little bit too long on the number of 10. This is the 1941 Lark tail car, observation car. It's a Southern Pacific train. It was only in 1941. This car lasted less than a year. It was the 400. Southern Pacific rear-ended 2 of these cars, destroyed both of them. So in 1942, they used a New York Central car. Well, I think they painted that one to match, but it ended up with a different car. But this is what I was talking about earlier with a vinyl cutting machine. That train, all the stripes on it end up in the same spot, except for the diner and let's see, I think the RPO and the baggage car were the same. But inevitably you have a dimension from the black roof down to the top of the window, and then that gets covered. And then you have an open area where the windows are, and then you have a closed area below the windows and the rest of the car. And it really sped things up. So do I have any other questions?
Yeah, Ed, we had one question in the chat about thinning paint. So do you thin your paints typically, or do you use them straight out of the jar, and kind of what's your thinning process?
Well, you know, that's kind of a difficult thing to answer. But what I do to keep it simple is I thin paint to a consistency of water. And I inevitably thin paint about 50-50, but it's not precise. And what I mean by that is when you go to thin paint, you have to make sure that the paint is good to, you know, before you start. But the older that scale coat gets, the thicker it gets. And sometimes I'll mix 60-40. So it ends up a little bit more thinner than usual. But I just don't thin to a ratio. I thin to a viscosity. And when I look at the jar, I shake it a little bit and make sure that it's got that consistency of water. And that's how I thin it.
Can kind of extend that to an extended question of, so one of the things I do use True Color. I like the idea that you can buy the acetone, you can buy a gallon at Costco or at Home Depot. But what I tend to do is when you use some paint out of a jar, I tend to put some acetone in to fill it back up a little bit. So the jars have different levels of thinning kind of already in them. And I kind of try to remember that. I haven't written it down. Is that something that you think makes sense? So in other words, instead of putting the jar away without thinning it, after you've opened it and you say you use half the jar, you thin that as you do it the first time, then fill the jar up a bit with thinner so that you maintain the viscosity of the paint while it's being stored.
Yeah, I've found that I don't put anything back in the jar. Once the jar is open, it only comes out. Nothing goes back in. And the reason for that is somebody inevitably will take thinned paint and put it back in the jar. I never, ever do that because it will destroy the paint. And I'm speaking mostly of scale coat. I'm not sure about True Color, but True Color, you need to use their thinner for. And I think, you know, it's acetone base, whatever. If you're having luck with it, good luck, good for you, you know. I use lacquer thinner. I buy it by the gallon, and I use a lot of that too. But I never put paint back in the bottle.
So whatever's in the cup when you're done, that just goes out, that goes away.
Right. Just, it's got a out hole and that's it. Doesn't go in.
Question about the compressor. Do you use straight compressor air or do you use a tank as a buffer?
I have a tank. It's out in the garage. I don't use it. I might someday. I do have, I'm looking at it right now. I've got one of those real fancy dancy compressors with a bottle, and it leaks and I don't use it. So, but I use that little Binks compressor. It's I guess what they call it, a pancake compressor. Some people say that it leaves a pattern on the model. I don't know what they're talking about because I've never seen that. I think that's only in somebody's mind. I don't know. I like I said, I've never seen that. And I try to get the model to look like a car show judging contest model as far as gloss. It should be glossy and brand new looking. That way you can decal it right away, well, after it dries, but you can decal it right on top of that.
So I guess two questions on before we leave that on compressors. So oilless versus oil compressors, something to think about. And then what about moisture traps? Is having a separate moisture trap and regulator, is that important?
Well, that depends on where you live. If you're over on the coast where there's a lot of moisture in the air, humidity, then yes, by all means, you need a separator. I'm looking outside today and I see a lot of clouds, but it's got some sunshine. But here in the desert, I don't have it. I don't use it. It just doesn't, it's not necessary until I get a day like today where it's rained the last 4 days and the humidity is up to 65%. Now I'm starting to take a chance. So I really have to be careful. I've sprayed and I had a little leak where the air hose went into the gun. And I've had, I was spraying and all of a sudden my hands started getting wet. And what the heck is this? And it was pulling moisture out of the air. And thank goodness it didn't hit the model. But I've actually had that when it's been, sometimes I have to paint and I have to paint when it's raining. But most of the time I paint when it's really dry. So it depends on where you live. But by all means, the safest thing to do is to have a separator and use all the filters that you can on it. I highly recommend it, even though I don't use it. If I were to today, I might be taking a big chance.
David Gibbons, I think you had a couple of questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
There, let me unmute first. You didn't much discuss the necessity to going to an internal mix versus an external mix. And I was curious on whether for just painting HO models like the SD40-2 that you're seeing that I've shown here, I used probably an airbrush that everybody would be appalled by, which is this little thing from Badger, which is what I started out with. And I ended up with a pebbled finish on the model. So I think that breaking down and getting something better like this, that's another Badger, but an external mix. But I'm wondering, I see you have external and internal mix brushes. Is an internal mix worth the trouble to keep it clean?
You probably have more problems with an internal mix than you already have. But your problem is the paint. You're using acrylics, aren't you?
Yes, sir, and I will continue to do so. I refuse to use solvent-based paints. No disrespect to you, sir. I have to learn to use them is the thing.
Yeah. Well, go ahead and give it a good try. It's just, they're always going to be like that. It's unfortunate. And the amount of paint that we use is, it's really insignificant as far as models and things like that. But I don't want to get into a political discussion, but the paint is your culprit on that. And like I said, I don't use acrylics and I probably never will. I find my models are more important than that, so.
Setting aside the issue of the desirability of the solvent or non-solvent based paint, is an internal mix have advantages over a good external mix, leaving aside the question of which paint we're using?
Yeah, well, the basics are the external mix mixes the paint on the outside of the gun. The internal mix and mixes it inside.
Right.
So the situation occurs that when you go to clean the gun, you're going to have to clean that gun a lot more precisely than you would. You're going to have to break it down completely in order to clean it. And I'm not sure, I've tried the internal mix guns, and I do have some, but I do have problems with them. And my go-to gun is the Binks Ren. It's an external mix gun. And that one I can pretty much close my eyes and paint with. I can paint blind with that. And with certain paints, I am blind to the surface. If you've ever used All Clad 2, so I use a chrome paint, and you can't see the paint coming out of the nozzle, and you can't see it on the model, and it's extremely difficult. I painted a Santa Fe lounge car 7 times before I got it right.
Ouch.
And it's expensive too. It's $8. Well, back then it was $8 a bottle for 1 ounce. But the technique is you have to paint like a robot. You can't deviate at all with that paint. It's very precise, and it is not forgiving. It's really difficult. One of the most difficult paints I've ever used. But for the purpose of model railroads and painting and all that, I would suggest all of you just to get a external mix gun. The internal is more for precise things and whatever's that I can't think of right now. But the idea of painting a model, I paint lots of models. I paint them as fast as I can, and I try to get as much material on the model as possible, as quick as possible, without covering up any detail. And that's the important part right there, without covering up the detail. Because that's why I have holidays, and everybody knows what a holiday is now. It's not a day off at work. It's a place on your object that you're painting where the paint didn't didn't adhere to. Or if I say adhere to, then you might think it peeled off, but it's a place that I missed. And that's an important part too. So I paint, and I just get enough paint on there to make sure that it's good to go from an aspect of looking at it and saying under a bright light, yeah, this looks good.
Do you
Well, see,
use
this
any
is what-
clear flat finishes? Can you use dull coat over your scale coat, or scale coat have a dull coat?
The scale coat does have a dull coat, and you can mix the two. I go with what is it, about, it's about a 90% gloss and maybe 85% gloss and 15% dull coat in my jar. I keep a separate jar that's got, I call it semi-gloss, just because that's what my term works for me. But
Is that for over top of decal, or is that just your general finish? Can you decal on top of that?
On top of the semi?
The mix, your 85 mix.
No, that's the last portion of the paint.
Understand.
It's glossy when you put the decals on, because that's the way scale coat comes out. It's gloss. There are 1 or 2 products that they sell that is not real glossy, And I would stay away from those. Like engine black is not real glossy, but you don't want that. That's a more of a detail after the model's done.
Got it.
But when you paint, you want it as glossy as possible so that the decal will stick really, really good and get all the air bubbles out. That, once you get the decal on, then you can spray it with dull coat, you can spray it with gloss coat. I had an Amtrak engine where I used another technique, and what I did is I painted it with a gloss coat, and then I went over it again after while it was still fresh with a probably 95% lacquer thinner and 5% gloss coat, and shot the model again. And what that does is it brings the gloss to the surface. So it was actually, it turned out okay, but I think it was a little bit too glossy, but everything's brand new once.
Thanks.
Okay, more questions?
John Cockle has a question about, he has an airbrush with the needle tip. And Mr. Cockle, does your airbrush have an arrangement where you have this, little part that goes inside of this part that goes into a nozzle up at the front? Or are you talking a needle tip that comes in from the back of the body?
Yeah, it's all the way from the back. It's like a long shaft that goes all the way through, and there's an adjustment at the very back of it there. And I find that I've got to break the whole thing down and really clean it, and it kind of gets gummy up inside the tip and around that.
Yeah, that sounds like a internal mix. Yeah, those are going to have to be broke down and cleaned every time you use it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said earlier, I'd suggest that everybody and they're not expensive, get an external mix and learn how to use that. It's a little more forgiving, until my gun starts giving me problems, until it talks to me and says I don't want to paint anymore, I don't clean it. I backwash it. And what I mean by backwashing is that I take after I'm done painting, I clean the jar out. I take the jar off and physically clean it. And then I put fresh lacquer thinner in it. And then I I open it up to where the maximum amount of material is coming out of the gun. And I take a paper towel and put it over the front of the nozzle. And you'll see bubbles come out in the jar. And I go back and forth. I put it on, take it off, put it on, take it off. And what that does is it breaks anything loose that's inside the gun, because there is material in the external mix guns also. It comes from the jar and it siphons up to the nozzle and then comes out. So what you're doing is backwashing it. And what happens is that the lacquer thinner dilutes the material that's in there and then breaks it loose, and it shoves it out the front of the gun. And you do that about 3 times and your gun's pretty clean. If you're going to be painting with any paints with iridescence, and iridescent is like metallic, any metallic paints, you really should clean it after you use metallics. I talked to my buddies in LA and some of the guys that paint professionally, and they say, well, you have to clean the gun every time you use it. And yeah, I guess so. But it depends on, and some of them have a gun for light colors, some have a gun for dark colors. It just, you can go into oblivion with these guns, and I choose not to. I saw something about using floor wax. Somebody had a question on that. Did somebody have a question about pledge or future floor wax? No? That I painted with that too. I had a Walther's, the Skytop Lounge, and I painted it as a Southern Pacific car. And everybody know what a Skytop Lounge is? It's a Milwaukee car. The whole back half of it is glass. Well, I stripped it. I tried to get the Milwaukee stuff off of it, and it didn't strip very well, but it etched the windows. And
Oh, no.
I thought, oh boy, this is going to be a mess now. I've ruined the model. So I taped off the windows and cut little pieces of tape around them and all this. And I painted it, and I said, well, we'll just give it a try. So I got done with the paint work, and I said, I'm going to try this Pledge floor wax. And it's a polymer, and what it does is it just sticks to the floor, and it's glossy. So it's got a nice smell to it too. And that threw me back. The reason I say that is because usually I'm painting and I get the lacquer smell, and everybody kind of smells the lacquer a little bit for a while. And it kind of makes you wonder if, the water heater's next too close or something. You don't want explosions. But the future going through the gun threw me back because it smelled sweet and kind of perfumey. And it just, I don't know, it was just so weird. It kind of threw me. So I got done with it, and the whole back window area was like a white film. And I said, oh geez, this isn't working at all. So I hung it up in my layout room, and the next day I looked at it, and one corner of one of the windows had a little clear spot on it. I says, what is that? And I looked at it again and kind of thought about it. And I said, I wonder if this is going to go the way I want it to go. And so I put it back, looked at it the next day, and about half the windows had cleared up. And this future floor wax had gone into the etched windows that I etched with the paint remover and put a coat of clear on them, and they looked like they were brand new. I couldn't believe it. It fixed the model. I thought it was magic. Maybe it was, I don't know. But it worked really good. The only problem is that it's only glossed, and so most everything in nature is not fully gloss or fully flat. And I couldn't figure out a way to lessen the gloss or increase it, so I just left it. And it's on my layout now, it looks pretty good. But any other questions? Everybody know how to spray now?
I think that was great, Ed. I thank you very much for taking the time to do that today, and I think everybody got a lot of info. So thanks very much.
One other quick question for Ed. Do you have a sequence that you use for colors, light to dark or vice versa?
I paint light colors first and then dark colors.
Okay, thanks.
Question.
The person that said they have a question, please speak up and ask your question.
I wanted to stop my phone from ringing. I always paint light colors first and then dark colors. You go from light to dark.
Personal protection.
I put a glove on my left hand.
What about mask?
No. I spray out my patio door, and the spray goes outside. And there's always a little bit of wind out here, and it just carries off the fumes. So I do that. I think somebody had a question, or I saw something at the bottom of the screen about a vent or spray booth or something. Yeah, I don't use a spray booth. I just spray out my patio door. It's right over there, and the spray just dissipates into the atmosphere. And I don't get close enough to it to breathe in the air that comes off of it. So
Thank you very much.
I would suggest that people do that if they're going to be in close contact. Don't do as I do. Don't try this at home.
So Ed, you don't have any nearby neighbors? You're not in a neighborhood where your neighbor is close by, just like right over a fence or something?
No.
Or are you close and you don't worry about it because the wind is going to take it away?
Yeah, they're not close. They're pretty far away. It's not going to. They're never going to. They might smell a little bit of it, but that's about it. They might get a little odor, but yeah, we're far enough apart that we don't have to worry about that. And I'm on a corner lot too, so it doesn't. It's not going to go that way or that way. And it usually just goes to the, if I'm standing out there looking out, it goes to the right. So they're never going to be bothered by it.
I believe Mr. Chinnis has a question.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, thanks so much, David. I did have a question, but Phil put it to Ed. It was about the moisture trap. And since I live in San Francisco, I guess I'm going to have to think about investing in one. Ed, thanks for a great presentation.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, I hope I made sense. Sometimes I wonder. But yeah, if you live where there's a lot of moisture, you're going to have to get a moisture trap. I probably should have one. I should have a separator, but I don't have the compressor doesn't use oil. So
One thing you can do, by the way, folks, to get away from the need for a moisture trap, I'm pointing at my source of compressed air, which is a CO2 bottle at high pressure and a pressure regulator, and using an inert dry gas, whether nitrogen, argon, CO2, you're not going to have to worry about moisture, but you have to go through the trouble to get such a bottle, charge the bottle, and have a high pressure regulator. The other advantage is it's quiet.
yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I have one thing I'd like to add, your list of spray guns. There's another one on the market called Chandler. They're a competitor of Pachette, equal quality. Can't give you model numbers. They have if you want online, you can probably find them. They have a whole list of guns available too, but they're a very good gun.
I have one.
A third channel, okay. And the other one, the compressor, I ran into a very odd one on that. My family dentist. My dentist was converting an office over to a central air supply, and he had a little compressor he used to use in his office. I got it. It was a beautiful little piece of machinery. It's a little, it looks like an old-fashioned stove, really, but it's a very quiet compressor. You have it running, you can hardly hear the thing. Pumps about 50 pounds pressure, and it's turned out to be just ideal for doing spraying. I haven't done it for many years, to be honest with you, but it's a neat piece of equipment.
One thing that when you mentioned that, I was thinking about equipment that I got. One thing that I didn't mention was how do you tell when you can put a second coat, of paint on? Say your model has two different colors, and you need to do the sniff test and just smell it to make sure that the gases have already off-gassed. But I have this piece of equipment, and it's got a tube that's, well, you can't see it. It's about this long, and it's got a heater and a little fan in it. And I got it when our police department here in Henderson was converting from film to digital. And they would put rolls of film in that to dry them. And I ended up, they threw it out, and I dumpster dove into the dumpster to get it. But it's quite a unique little piece. The problem is it vibrates a little bit. And one time I went to use it and I walked away and I came back and my passenger car was laying on the carpet and all full of fuzz. But if I could figure out a way to stop it from moving, I'd probably utilize it. But, yeah, in order to put a second coat on, you need to do a sniff test. I usually wait in about 2 weeks. I give it 2 weeks in between coats. And that way I'm pretty sure that it's pretty well cured. I had one of those Pepsi can Amtrak engines. I had 11 different stages of paint. So 2 weeks plus 11, it ended up taking a long time to paint that. But
Just don't let your neighbors see you sniffing model railroad cars, ladies and gentlemen.
yeah, well, I think they smell, when I painted the Chevelle, I painted it in my garage. They probably got a good whiff of that. I'm sure, because I opened the door and just a bellow of spray came out. Probably not supposed to do that, but oh well. Nobody knows what I'm doing when I have my door shut.
Yeah,
So
just
is
aside,
everybody gonna paint today?
excellent.
Absolutely not.
No?
Well, super, Ed. Well, thank you again. And we really appreciate it. And hopefully everybody will go out and do some great painting over the rest of the weekend. So
Yeah.
thanks. Everybody,
All right.
hands up on the reaction, a clap there for Ed. Thanks very
Oh,
much.
thank you. It's my pleasure. Yeah.
Cool.
All right.
Well, that we will close off the clinic there. And now we can move on to, thanks again, Ed, really appreciate it. That was great. Lots of great discussion and
Okay.
lots of good ideas to think through. So go ahead and open it up for anyone to talk about what they're doing modeling at this point.
Huh.
Any interesting modeling to discuss or anything else you'd like to discuss?
Come on, Pat.
Where you are? What city are you in, Ed?
Henderson, Nevada.
Oh, Edison?
Henderson.
Henderson.
Yeah. Just south of Las Vegas.
The bedroom community for Las Vegas.
Yeah. Yeah, I try not to go to Vegas. Lately, it's been Monsoon City.
Yeah.
Yeah, the sky is full of clouds again today. They said we're going to get some more today. So we'll see.
You have to get your moisture trap out.
Yeah, or just not paint. Yeah, I'm probably going to have to go get one. I've got a compressor over there. It's a one of those micro mark, I think. It's blue, got a blue box and the compressor's inside, and it seems pretty neat. It's very, very quiet. I don't even know it's running. And I think it's got traps on it. But yeah, the regulators and traps, those you need to have.
This is the Pash one. I got one of these. It's like $23 from Amazon. Built a little wood frame to hold it.
Oh yeah.
And what I do is I just use one of the inexpensive oilless compressors with a tank from Harbor Freight. And I have a 10-foot air hose on it, and I actually put it outside the garage, the compressor outside the garage door. And then I've got a portable hose off my spray booth that goes under the garage door. So I lower the garage door down so it's only open about 6 inches. And the compressor's outside. So the fact it's noisy doesn't matter because it's not inside the garage.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a lot of compressors too. We have
I used to have a compressor and a full set of airbrushes.
Pardon?
Yeah, I used to have a compressor and a full set of airbrushes, but I've given it all up because of health concerns with the atomized paint.
Well, that's why they make air filtration masks and gloves and all that.
I have a P95.
Yeah. It's, yeah, we have to all be concerned about our health, and by all means, I have, when I spray my car, I have a respirator and all that. I cover up pretty good, so it, you know, I'm not going to get any contamination.
Anyway, I found that brush painting with the latest acrylics really works, and it gets rid of the airbrush.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have to leave early today. Real life is calling me away. I have to be a moving man again. Take care, everybody. Thank you for the clinic, Ed, and thanks, Phil, for hosting this. I'll catch you guys at the next get-together.
Okay, David.
Thank you, David.
Oh.
Right, Dave.
Yeah.
Phil, I had my hand up there.
Go for it.
Yeah, just mentioning what we're working on at the moment. I'm not doing much for myself, but I have been going over to Denair to help get Tom Van Horn's layout up and running, because it's going to be on the layout tours for the Southern Pacific Historical Society convention in Modesto in September. And so if anybody's going over to that one, I know there's a lot of SP fans here. That layout will be on the tour on Saturday, the 17th of September.
Yeah, Paul, I'm gonna be there. Actually, I'm working the convention as part of the group staff.
Oh, great. I've been working, there's a little club in Denair that's just 4 blocks away from Tom's place. And the guys from that club have been helping to get the layout up and running again. And I just had a report from them yesterday that they do have it all functional now. So what I'm going to mostly be working on is getting some of the basic scenery in place.
If you guys will send me a note, somebody will send me a note on that, just as a reminder, I'll add it into the next Coast Extra so folks see it. I try to get events in there. If people let me know, I'll put them in, and so folks can see them and get reminded of them.
The
Cool.
convention has a website, SP Historical Technical Society 2022. The dates are September 14 through 17.
Excellent. John Cockle, you had a question or a discussion item, something to talk about?
Yeah, let me see if I can share my screen. Let's see here. I'm more familiar with Teams than with Zoom here, so
Yeah, just use the green share button at the bottom of Zoom, and the upper left that you get in the display is your display screen.
So
All the others, yeah.
Here's what's behind door number 2 for those of you old enough to know what that means, right? So, do you see the Calaveras cement?
I don't think you click share yet. You got to click on it and then click.
There
you go.
All right. So
excellent.
So Phil, I guess you got my note about being open on the 21st, and like I said, it's great because it's going to inspire me to kind of push through to some projects that I've been working on. So this is good. But so this truck is a 3D. It's from a company called Royale Models with an E at the end of Royal. I think they're out of Washington. I think Washington State. And it came as a 3D model. It was so that was all unpainted, and so that's what I've been working on recently. Is just building up that truck. The truck you can order a tractor, and then the set of doubles is separate. And I spray painted that with Tamiya spray can, just rattle can, the silver, and then everything else was hand painted. So that's what I've been working on. And while we've been doing this clinic this morning, I installed the fence around the cement terminal there. So I was kind of killing 2 birds with 1 stone, doing some modeling while listening to this clinic on the airbrushing. So that was cool. So anyway, I just noticed that my bumper there at the end of the track is askew. I must have bumped it off the track, so it's obviously not secure there. That's funny. I just noticed that.
You bumped your bumper.
Exactly. So anyways, just a little project I've been working on. I like little kind of evening projects. The truck was painted over a couple evenings while watching, you know, some sort of a TV show with my wife or something like that. I just got this going on the TV tray. I like little projects like that. They're kind of fun. So
That's 3D printed, the truck trailers.
it was 3D printed, and it comes all in one. Like each trailer was separate, and then the dolly was a separate piece. And then you add the wheels come separate. So it's a bit of a kit, you know, to put it all together, but all the piping, the ladders and everything come as one kit, and then the wheels are separate. And like I said, the tractor was separate from the a separate kit. You can order a different type of tractor. They have Peterbilt's, Kenworths, some with the sleeper cab, some with not. So it's and I think they make them in HO scale.
Yeah.
It's a good company. They're not, you know, that this whole the tractor and the trailer is probably, I don't know, $40 altogether, you know, but yeah, you know, I got one of them for kind of a signature scene on the layout. I needed a cement truck for the cement terminal there. So anyways, it's kind of a fun little kit. So that's what I've been modeling lately. So, and I've been working on trying to get the scenery going. As you see, the background there, it still needs some bushes and stuff. So that's my push over the next couple of weeks, is to finish this area for that open house. Anyways, that's it.
Best reason to have an open house is to get your projects focused.
Yeah, that's why I figured it'd be a good inspiration for that. So that's good.
So, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, so y'all probably know I do some 3D printing. But this model was offered on something like Etsy. I forget but it's a 3D sharing thing. This is O scale, and it's a overhead line maintenance car from, I think, Detroit. But anyway, that model for the drawings, the CAD drawings for all the parts was $8. So I downloaded it yesterday, and I've started slicing it, and we'll see how it comes off. One other thing, I'm not remembering what it is. I'll stop share and come on later with it.
Fran, pardon me for interrupting. This is exactly what I would be interested in, since I've started 3D printing. Do you have any additional information about where maybe Etsy, you said? How would one?
No, I'll post it. I'll post it in just a second. I have the page up. So the other thing is, I've had this Whitcomb model I've been working on, O scale, and it was kind of bugging me that I couldn't get the lettering on it. So anyway, a little bit of extra work and research. That's the model. But for the single hooded model, they put the Whitcomb up horizontally with the letters that get bigger and smaller. That was kind of tricky, but I got it. And then for the double-ended, for the big Whitcombs with cap on each end, it's written vertically down the center of the grill. So anyway, that's what I've been doing, and that's been getting my kicks lately. And I'll post that link in just a second.
Cool. Anyone else have anything they'd like to talk about?
Phil, just a quick fill-in. Maybe David gave you the information. Cal Central Club is going to be open for the 25th in September as a visitation.
Yep.
I didn't say at the time, though, is what we are, who we are, because a lot of Coast members have never been there. We're in the old South Pacific Coast Depot in Agnew, part of Santa Clara. It's an HO layout, complete, fills the entire building. It is fully scenic. It's up and operational. We have a little bit of HON3 included on it. Can't take, nobody's too active in that particular phase, but it is on there too. Anyway, we're proud of our layout, and I think it's worth taking a look at if anybody has a chance to visit us.
Yep. And you guys also do operations. So
Oh, yes.
I know you did a Bay Rails operation session
Right.
I went
Yeah,
to. So
Yeah,
it's
we
an
have car
opportunity to
races.
come down. If you're interested in operations, potentially stop by and talk to the Cal Central folks about when they operate and getting in an operating session.
Okay.
Excellent.
So that model, I just posted it. Let me know if you don't get it. But it is pretty much, it's a mandatory resin print. Filament printing, you could take the files and work with them and probably get something if you're real familiar with the CAD.
So that's the link that's posted.
And it's probably the file with all the parts in it. It's probably about 18 parts. And many of them are really small. You could do it if you're doing it in resin. You could get multiple parts on the build plate at a time. I'm estimating it's going to be probably 20 to 26 hours of print time.
That looks fascinating.
Well,
Glad
and
to
you
see
all,
somebody's printing like that.
well, you also could use the parts and put them on a flat car.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any use for the overhead maintenance part, but it's a neat looking truck with a flatbed and toolboxes on it.
This is O scale?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, $8. That's a lot of CAD work for $8. It would probably really take me 2 or 3 weeks to draw those parts, and then a matter of printing them and fitting them and fine tuning them. So.
Wow.
Go ahead, Jim.
I started playing around with paper recently again. And there's a website I recently ran across, which is New Tracks Modeling.
Yep.
It had a really good article on basically using label paper to do windows with, which I thought was really clever, because that's been always my downfall, is getting the little thin slivers of paper or something like that down on the windows. And what they do is they take the label, you print on the label, and then you slap it on a piece of acetate, and you can cut on the acetate, but you don't have to worry about if you overcut or anything like that, because it's still adhered to the acetate, which is a really clever idea. So I'm trying it right now, and it seems to work pretty well. So see what kind of paper stuff I can come up with.
They're actually doing a build along on that New Tracks. If you go on there, it's actually active now, of a card model of a gas station. So they've got all the prints, so you can print all the parts off, and then they're going through the process of building it, attaching it to the heavier cardboard, and kind of building it out. So I think there are 2 people building it. So those build alongs are kind of nice. And that one's basically free, because you just can download the print and print it out on your own printer. So
yeah, I do recommend it.
Yeah, there's some other ones. They're doing an ON30, one of the Berkshire Valley short freight cars or ore cars. They're going to start in September. There are a couple of others there. If you kind of, one of those things of having someone build something that, and they also give you generally a discount if you buy a kit. So like the Berkshire Valley cars are 25% off.
Larges and the urine channel gets tight. You cannot be certain.
Let's try to get the link, and The audio came on, so forget it.
Yep.
But yeah, it's new track. Look for new tracks modeling on YouTube and you'll find it.
Here,
And that's it for me for right now.
cool. Anyone else have anything exciting?
Just curious what cities people live in, because with Zoom, you can be anywhere. And
Yeah.
I've just come back from traveling, and I like to know, to kind of check with people if I'm traveling and I'm going through one of their cities. So I don't know if people want to say, I'm in El Cerrito, California. Anybody else want to say where they are?
Mountain View.
Mountain View.
I'm in San Jose.
Who's in San Jose?
Don Short.
Ah,
This is Paul. I'm in Sunnyvale.
Campbell's
I'm
in
in
San
Newark.
Francisco.
I didn't hear that. Oh, well.
Cabell Chinnis. I'm in San Francisco, Joyce. Hi there.
Hi there. Nice to meet you. I'm in El Cerrito. Anybody wants to see my layout anytime, call me up. It's outside G-scale, and it's kind of a wreck right now. I've been traveling for the past month. So everything, you guys don't have to deal with leaves and squirrels and gophers and all that I have to deal with. So it's really a mess right now. But if you want to see a mess, it's kind of fun still. I'll be on tour one of these days.
I must say, I was just recently over there to see her layout, and as she says, it is a mess, but it's got potential, and she certainly has some great gardening all around it. It's worth seeing.
So I'll put this up just if anyone's interested. So these were the new tracks modeling that's coming up. So this is from Seaport. Well, that's interesting. An upper
I've lost you, Phil.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Phil went offline.
I don't know if that went away. I got a weird message from Zoom about me sharing. I don't know what happened there. So, oh well. But I put a link to their site in the chat if anyone's interested.
Yeah, if anyone is interested in modeling seaports and boats and things like that, I just got an announcement from the English company Model U that does they scan people in costume and then 3D print them. And they've just announced a whole series of fishermen and crew for boats.
Wow.
Can you put a link, Ken, to their site in the chat?
I will.
Cool.
Not on. I can't do it here, but I'll put it into the groups.io.
Yep, that'd be great. The PCR groups.io. That'd be excellent.
And by the way, they will print them not only in 4mm scale, they also print them in 3.5 if you want, and end scale.
But by the way, the other thing on that new tracks, if you go to their YouTube site, They actually started a new segment that's called the modeling lifestyle. And it's actually typically someone you'd really like to hear about as a modeler. Kind of the concept was an interview with John Allen and his friends. You know, and basically Lou Sassy did one that's pretty impressive, where he's got probably 50 pictures that he took of different things on it, mainly his ON30 layout, and talks about, you know, techniques, etc. So that was pretty cool. Well, I guess if there's no other comments, it's getting pushing 11 o'clock, and probably we'll call it for this week. We'll look forward to seeing everyone in a couple of weeks. We're not going to have a clinic scheduled or anything for 2 weeks from now, just because we have the national conventions going on then. I decided not to go. I decided I don't want to be on an airplane after having COVID and ending up in the hospital. I don't want to expose myself again. So I'm going to be staying home, but we'll have a great discussion in a couple of weeks. Look forward to seeing everyone then.
Okay, Phil, and will we see you in Tacoma for narrow gauge?
I am going to Tacoma. In fact, I'm going to drive. So if anyone's interested in talking about sharing a car driving up, I'm going to plan on driving instead of flying or taking the train, kind of for the same reasons.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking the same thing. Let's stay in touch.
Yeah, give me a ping, because I got a couple of vehicles depending on how many folks wanted to do it. It's basically you got to spend the night somewhere kind of north Eugene. My wife has a place, she stays there, and I'll probably pick that place. So she goes up typically every year, once or twice a year, does that drive. So
great.
Cool. Have a great couple of weeks, everyone, and mark your calendars for the 21st of August. And we'll look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks.
All right.
Thanks all.
Bye.
Bye now.
Goodbye.